The crimson forest burned around Kiraville as she ran through the ancient trees of Desert 4. Her forearms pushing aside branches that clawed at her iridescent scales like desperate fingers trying to hold her back behind. There came the sound of 46. Footsteps belonging to the last of her people. The elderly who could barely walk. The children who did not understand why they had to run. And the wounded warriors who refused to die in their sleep. She was a spear maiden of the Velith, trained since birth to protect her people. And now she was leading them through a nightmare that had no end in sight. The Carven Dominion had come to Desert 4 3 cycles ago, and in that short time, they had turned her beautiful world into a graveyard. These insectoid monsters did not want land or resources or power. They wanted something far worse. They harvested sentient beings for their bio-neural tissue, ripping out the very essence of thinking creatures to fuel their horrible machines. Kira had watched her mother dissolve in a harvesting vat, had heard her father scream as the drones dragged him away, and she had sworn on her ancestors that she would not let the same fate claim these last survivors. Spear Maiden, gasped old Thenis, his 3 remaining arms clutching his walking staff as he struggled to keep pace. We cannot maintain this speed much longer. Kira looked back at her people and felt her heart break at what she saw: children with hollow eyes carried by mothers who had not slept in days, warriors missing limbs who still gripped their weapons with whatever hands remained, elders who had seen 1,000 seasons now reduced to frightened refugees. The sanctuary lies beyond the Broken Spine Canyon, she called back to them, trying to fill her voice with confidence she did not feel. We will rest there, and the ancient wards will hide us from their censors. She prayed to her ancestors that she was right. The Broken Spine Canyon was sacred ground, a place where her people had worshipped for 10,000 years before the stars fell and brought outsiders to their world. If any place could shelter them, it would be there. But first they had to reach it. The crimson trees began to thin as they approached the canyon's edge, and Kira felt a cold dread settle in her stomach when she saw what waited for them. Carven drones, at least 30 of them, stood in a perfect line blocking the narrow path that led down into the canyon. Their black chitin armor gleamed with an oily sheen, and their mandibles clicked in that horrible rhythm that meant they were communicating. With their hive mind at their center stood a larger creature, a drone commander with red markings on his carapace that identified him as one who had claimed many kills. Skethrix, Kira whispered, recognizing the monster who had led the assault on her home village. The commander stepped forward and made a sound that her translator rendered into words. Little scale creature. Think she can run from the Dominion? Skethrix clicked, his compound eyes reflecting her terrified people like 1,000 tiny mirrors. The hive thanks you for gathering so many specimens in one place. It saves us the trouble of hunting them individually. Kira gripped her bone spear tighter, feeling the sacred weapon thrum with the spiritual energy of 7 generations of warriors who had carried it before her. This spear had slain 1,000 enemies of her people. It had been blessed by priests and bathed in the light of 3 moons. It was the last treasure of her fallen house. You will not touch them, she declared, stepping forward to place herself between the Carven and her Skethrix made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. 1 little warrior against 30 drones and a commander. Your mathematics skills are as poor as your survival instincts. Kira turned to face her people one last time. Run, she commanded them, pointing to a narrow crack in the canyon wall that the Carven were too large to fit through. That passage leads to the sanctuary. Go now and do not look back. We cannot leave you, protested young Vetha, a child of only 12 seasons who had appointed herself as Kira's shadow since her parents had been taken. You can and you will, Kira said firmly, kneeling to look the child in her golden eyes. I am a spear maiden, and this is what we do. We stand so that others may run. Now go and live and remember me." She did not wait to see if they obeyed. She turned and charged at the carven line with a war cry that her ancestors would have been proud to hear. The first drone fell with her spear through its throat before it could even raise its blade. She ripped the weapon free and spun, taking the legs out from under a second enemy, then vaulted over its falling body to drive her spear into a third. 4 arms meant 4 times the striking power, and she used every advantage her birth had given her. She was faster than them, more agile, and she knew this terrain like she knew her own heartbeat, but they were many, and she was one. A blade caught her across the back, and she felt hot blood run down her scales. Another strike opened a gash on her left secondary arm. She kept fighting. Behind her she could hear her people scrambling through the narrow passage, their desperate footsteps growing fainter as they fled to safety. Good. If she could buy them enough time, then her death would mean something. She killed 2 more drones before the brute hit her. It was a massive carven, twice the size of the others, with chitin so thick that her spear barely scratched it. Creature backhanded her with a limb like a tree trunk, and she flew through the air. Crashing against the canyon wall was enough force to crack stone. She rose anyway. Her body screamed in protest, but she rose anyway. The brute charged, and she met its charge with her spear aimed at the gap between its head and thorax. The sacred bone spear, carrier of 7 generations of warrior spirit, struck the hardened chitin at full force and shattered. Kira stared in disbelief at the broken haft in her hands, at the scattered fragments of the blade that lay on the blood-soaked ground. 7 generations of her family had carried this weapon. 7 generations of honor and duty and sacrifice gone in an instant. The brute knocked her down and stood over her. And then Skethrix was there, his serrated blade gleaming in the fading light. "Brave little creature," the commander clicked. "The hive will enjoy dissolving that defiance out of you." Kira gripped the broken spear haft and prepared to die fighting. She had bought her people time. That was enough. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to her ancestors, asking them to guide the survivors to safety, asking them to watch over little Vetha and old Thenis and all the others who now carried the last hope of the Velith. Pia Pleskethrix raised his blade for the killing blow, and then the sky exploded. A sound like thunder tore through the canyon, so loud that even the carven stumbled back in confusion. Something burning and bright ripped through the crimson canopy above, trailing smoke and fire as it screamed toward the ground. Kira watched in stunned amazement as the object, some kind of vessel, slammed into the canyon floor. Right in the middle of the carven formation, 3 drones were crushed instantly, their chitin shells cracking like eggs under the impact. The others scattered, their hive mind overwhelmed by this unexpected interruption. Skethrix whirled toward the crashed vessel, his mandibles clicking rapidly as he tried to process what had just happened. "What is this?" he demanded of no one in particular. "What manner of attack is this?" The vessel, Kira could see now that it was some kind of escape pod, small and angular and made of metal she did not recognize, sat in a crater of its own making, steam rising from its scorched hull. For a moment nothing happened. Then the hatch blew open with a foam but with a dent, loud bang, and something emerged from the wreckage. It was a creature unlike anything Kira had ever seen. Tall, but not as tall as a Velith, with only 2 arms and 2 legs, covered in some kind of flexible armor that was torn and burned in several places. Its face was flat, with small eyes and a strange protrusion where a Velith would have smooth scales. Red blood like her own ran from a cut on its forehead. The creature looked around at the carven, at the burning forest, at Kira lying wounded on the ground, and then it did something that made Kira's heart stop. It smiled. Sergeant Marcus Cole had experienced bad days before, but this one was rapidly climbing toward the top of his personal list. 3 hours ago, he had been aboard the reconnaissance cruiser Adamant, running a simple scan of an uncharted system. 2 hours ago, the Carven ambush fleet had appeared out of nowhere and torn his ship apart. 1 hour ago, he had crammed himself into the last functioning escape pod as the Adamant exploded around him, and now he was standing in some kind of red forest, surrounded by giant bug monsters, with a wounded alien creature at his feet, and absolutely no idea what was going on. The training kicked in before his brain could catch up. Drew his M7 sidearm from its holster. Thank God it had survived the crash, and raised it toward the largest bug creature, the one with the red markings that screamed "Leader" in any language. "Nobody move," he said in Galactic Common, hoping his translator implant was still working. "I am Sergeant Marcus Cole of the Terran Marine Corps, and I am having a really bad day, so I would appreciate it if you ugly bugs would just back the hell off." The bug leader made a clicking sound that his translate rendered as confusion and amusement. "What manner of creature is this?" it asked the drones around it. "The Hive has no record of this species in our databases." Marcus felt a cold satisfaction at that humanity was new to the galactic stage, having only achieved faster than light travel 30 years ago. Most alien species had never encountered a human before. Most alien species did not know what humans were capable of. One of the smaller bugs rushed at him with a blade raised, apparently deciding that an unknown creature was still just prey. Marcus put 2 rounds through its head and watched it drop. The other bugs froze. Chemical projectile weapon. The leader clicked, its compound eyes focusing on the pistol in Marcus's hands. "Primitive but effective. Kill the creature and bring me that weapon for study." 5 drones charged at once. Marcus shot 3 of them before they covered half the distance, his aim steady despite the ringing in his ears and the blood running into his eyes. The 4th drone got close enough to swing its blade at him, and he ducked under the strike, shoved the pistol against its thorax, and pulled the trigger twice. The 5th drone slammed into him and knocked him back against the crashed pod, its mandibles snapping inches from his face. He headbutted it. Probably not his smartest move, given that its face was made of chitin, and his was made of flesh and bone. And while it reeled from the unexpected impact, he put his pistol under what he assumed was its chin and fired 6 bugs down. His magazine held 15 rounds, and he had used 9. Not great odds, but he had worked with worse. The leader was clicking frantically now, and Marcus realized with grim amusement that the thing was panicking. "Why do they not regenerate?" it demanded, pointing at its fallen drones. "The wounds should be closing. Why are they not healing?" Marcus laughed. Despite the situation, he had read the briefings about Carven biology during his deployment preparation. Their species had incredible regenerative abilities, able to heal from almost any wound in minutes, but that regeneration relied on specific chemical processes that were disrupted by certain heavy metals that just happened to be standard components in Terran ammunition. "Sorry to disappoint you," Marcus said, popping out his empty magazine and slamming in a fresh one. "But my bullets are toxic to your kind. Every shot is a kill shot." The wounded alien on the ground, a tall creature with 4 arms and beautiful iridescent scales, was staring at him with an expression he could not read. She was clearly a warrior, judging by her stance and the broken weapon in her hands. And she was clearly on the wrong side of whatever fight had been happening here. Enemy of my enemy and all that. Marcus decided. He moved to stand over her, placing himself between the bugs and the wounded alien. "Can you walk?" he asked without looking down at her. Yes, I think so," she replied, her voice filled with shock and confusion. "Then get behind me and stay close. We are leaving." The bug leader made an angry clicking sound. You think you can simply walk away from the Dominion? Strange creature, you are outnumbered and alone. Story of my life, Marcus replied, and opened fire. He took down 4 more drones before they could organize a response. His shots precise and economical despite the chaos. The alien warrior scrambled to her feet behind him, and he heard her gasp in pain. She was hurt badly, but she was moving, which was all that mattered right now. A blade came at him from the left, and he twisted aside, feeling the edge slice across his ribs. It hurt like hell, but the wound was shallow. He had taken worse in training exercises. He shot the drone that had cut him and kept moving, pushing toward a gap in the enemy line. This way, the alien warrior called from behind him, pointing toward a narrow path between the red trees that leads deeper into the canyon. They cannot follow easily through the tight spaces. Marcus did not argue with local expertise. He fired 3 more shots to keep the bugs back and then ran. Trusting the alien to guide him, they plunged into the narrow path, and the world became a maze of crimson trunks and tangled branches behind them. He could hear the bug leader screaming orders, but the pursuing footsteps were falling. Behind, the passage was too tight for the larger drones to navigate quickly. They ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, the alien warrior stumbled and fell, her legs giving out beneath her. Marcus stopped and turned back, kneeling beside her. "Hey, stay with me," he said, checking her wounds with the quick efficiency of battlefield first aid training. "You are losing a lot of blood, but nothing looks fatal. Can you tell me your name?" "Kiravel," she gasped, her golden eyes studying his face with intense curiosity. "I am Kiravel, spear maiden of the Velith. What are you?" "Human," Marcus replied, pulling an emergency bandage from his belt and pressing it against the worst of her cuts. "Name is Marcus Cole. Nice to meet you, even though the circumstances could be better." Kira stared at him as he worked, and he could see the questions burning behind her eyes. "You saved me," she said finally, as if she could not quite believe it. "You fell from the sky and you saved me. Why? You do not know me. You do not know my people. Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" Marcus paused in his work, considering the question. It was something he had never really thought about before. Why did humans do what they did? Why did they run toward danger instead of away from it? Why did they throw themselves between strangers and harm? He did not have a philosophical answer, so he gave her the only honest one he could. "Because you needed help," he said simply, "and I was there. That is just what we do." Kira's expression shifted to something he could not identify. "Your people must be very strange," she said. "Lady, you have no idea," Marcus replied with a tired grin. He finished bandaging her wounds and helped her to her feet, letting her lean against him for support. "Now how about you tell me what the hell is going on here? Who are those bug bastards, and why are they trying to kill you?" The story Kira told him as they made their slow way through the canyon made his blood run cold. The Carven Dominion was a galactic-level threat, a species that had conquered hundreds of worlds and harvested billions of sentient beings. The Velith had been a peaceful people, warriors by tradition, but not by choice, and they had been utterly unprepared for the horror that fell upon them. In 3 cycles, the Dominion had reduced a civilization of millions to a handful of refugees. Kira and her group, 46 survivors, including children and elderly, were quite possibly the last free Velith in existence. "And where is your group now?" Marcus asked. "The sanctuary," Kira said, pointing further into the canyon. "I told them to run while I held the enemy back. They should have reached the ancient temple by now, where the old wards hide them from Carven censors." Marcus nodded grimly. 46 people, refugees, civilians, wounded, hunted by an enemy that wanted to dissolve them for parts. He thought about his situation. His ship was destroyed. His crew was dead. and his rescue beacon might or might not have sent a signal before the pod crashed. Help might come in hours, or it might come in weeks, or it might not come at all. He had one pistol, 4 magazines of ammunition, a combat knife, and whatever supplies had survived in the escape pod against an entire invasion. Force, the smart move would be to find a place to hide and wait for. Rescue, the smart move would be to stay out of a fight. That was not his, but Marcus Cole had never been particularly good at making the smart move. Take me to them, he said. Kira looked at him in surprise. You would help us, even now that you know what we face, even now that you know how hopeless it is? Marcus shrugged, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Hopeless is relative, he said. And besides, those bugs ruined my ship and killed my friends. I owe them some payback. He offered her his hand. You okay, friend? Kira looked at his hand, then at his face, then at the blood still seeping from his wounds. He was injured and exhausted and completely outnumbered, and yet he was smiling. She took his hand and let him pull her forward. I am beginning to think, she said slowly, that your species is completely insane. Probably, Marcus agreed cheerfully, but it is the fun kind of insane. Now let us go save your people. The sanctuary of the Velith ancestors was a temple carved into the living rock of the canyon, its walls covered in symbols that glowed with a soft blue light. Kira had grown up hearing stories about this place, about the ancient priests who had built it 10,000 years ago, about the sacred wards that protected it from all who would do harm. She had never imagined she would enter it as a refugee. 46 survivors gathered in the main chamber looked up when Kira limped through the entrance, and she saw relief and confusion war across their faces. Relief that she was alive, confusion at the strange creature helping her walk. Spear Maiden, old Dennis called out, pushing through the crowd to reach her. We feared you had fallen. What happened? And what is that thing? His name is Marcus Cole, Kira said, and he saved my life. He is human, a species I have never heard of, and he has agreed to help us. A murmur ran through the refugees. Little Vetha pushed forward, her golden eyes wide as she stared up at Marcus. He looks strange, she declared with the blunt honesty of children. Why does he only have 2 arms? How does he do anything with only 2 arms? Marcus laughed, a warm sound that seemed to ease some of the tension in the chamber. We manage, he said, kneeling down to meet the child at eye level. It helps that we are too stubborn to admit when something is impossible. Stubborn, Vetha repeated, testing the word. It means we do not give up, Marcus explained, even when we probably should. Kira guided Marcus to a corner of the chamber where they could talk without being overheard. She had questions, so many questions, and she needed answers before she could decide whether to trust this strange creature completely. Tell me about your people, she said. Tell me where you come from and what you are. Marcus settled against the stone wall, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounded ribs. Humans come from a planet called Earth, he began. 3rd rock from a medium-sized yellow star in a galaxy you probably have not charted yet. We are pretty new to space travel. Only about 30 years since we figured out how to go faster than light. 30 years was nothing. The Velith had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. The Carven had been conquering worlds since before Kira's species had discovered fire. How could a species so young to the stars have developed warriors like this one? What is your world like? She asked. Marcus's expression shifted to something complicated. Part pride, part pain, part dark amusement. Earth is what the Galactic Union calls a Category 12 death world, he said. That means it is one of the most hostile environments capable of producing sentient life. Kira felt her scales tighten in surprise. She had heard of death worlds in her studies, planets where gravity was crushing, where the atmosphere was toxic, where predators lurked in every shadow. No civilization was supposed to emerge from such places. The conditions were too harsh. The survival requirements too extreme. That cannot be true, she said. Nothing sentient can evolve on a death world. And yet here I am, Marcus replied with a shrug. Earth is everything. Extreme temperatures that swing from frozen to boiling depending on where you stand. An atmosphere that is 20% combustible oxygen. A surface covered mostly in salt water that we cannot drink. Weather patterns that spawn massive destructive storms. Tectonic plates that cause the ground itself to shake and split. And more species of apex predator than you can count. And that is before you get into the microorganisms that constantly try to kill us from the inside. Kira stared at him in horror. How did your species survive? Spite, mostly, Marcus said with a grin. We looked at a universe that was trying very hard to kill us, and we said no. We climbed to the top of our food chain through sheer stubbornness. And when the planet threw challenges at us, we just adapted and overcame. We are too angry to die, basically. He said it like a joke, but Kira was beginning to understand. That it was not a joke at all. She had seen him take a blade wound during the fight with the Carvinch, had watched him continue fighting. As blood poured down his side, any Velith, with that injury, would have collapsed into hibernation shock. Their body forcing them into a healing sleep. Marcus had just gotten angrier. The wound, she said, gesturing at his bandaged ribs. Does it not incapacitate you? Does your body not demand rest? It hurts like hell, Marcus admitted. But pain is just information. It tells you something is wrong, but it does not get to decide what you do about it. Humans learned a long time ago to keep going despite the pain. Because on Earth, stopping meant dying. Kira tried to imagine living on a world like that. A world where you had to fight through agony just to survive. A world that shaped its children into creatures who refused to stay down. It was terrifying. And somehow, impossibly, it was also inspiring. What happened to your vessel? She asked. How did you come to fall from the sky at the exact moment I needed rescue? Marcus's expression darkened. My ship was the Adamant, a reconnaissance cruiser. We were scanning this system as part of a mapping mission when a Carven ambush fleet appeared out of nowhere. They hit us hard and fast, and the captain ordered an evacuation. But the escape pods launched right into their firing solution. I think I was the only one who made it to a pod in time. And even then, it was more luck than skill. I'm sorry for your loss, Kira said softly. Yeah, Marcus replied, his voice rough. They were good people, the best, and those bugs killed them without warning or mercy. He looked up at her with eyes that held a cold fire. I sent a distress beacon before I crashed. If it worked, rescue could come in days or weeks, but until then I am stuck here. And I figure I might as well make myself useful. There are thousands of Carven on Lesser 4, Kira warned him. Even with your weapons and your Deathworld resilience, you cannot fight them all. Maybe not, Marcus agreed, but I can make them regret every step they take toward your people. Before Kira could respond, Dennis hurried over with fear etched across his weathered face. Spear Maiden. The scouts have returned with terrible news. Carven forces have been spotted at both canyon entrances. They are surrounding us. Kira felt her heart sink. The sanctuary's wards could hide them from sensors, but they could not stop a physical search. The Carven searched the canyon thoroughly enough. They would eventually find the temple entrance. They were trapped. How many? Marcus asked, rising to his feet despite the pain. Hundreds, Dennis replied. Perhaps more. They are setting up camps and bringing in equipment. It appears they intend to stay. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes distant as he processed the information. Kira recognized that look. She had seen it on the faces of her battle masters when they were planning strategy. Show me the canyon layout, he said to Dennis. led them to an ancient map carved into the temple wall. Its lines showing every path and passage in the sacred canyon. Marcus studied it intently, tracing routes with his fingers, muttering calculations under his breath. "These narrow passages," he said finally, pointing to several choke points. "How stable is the rock above them?" "Very stable," Thenis replied. "These tunnels have stood for 10,000 years." "That is unfortunate," Marcus said with a slight frown. "I was hoping we could bring some ceilings down on their heads." "Okay. Different approach. How well do you know these paths?" "The one's too small for Carven to use easily." Kira stepped forward. "I know them well. I played in these canyons as a child." "Good," Marcus said, "because we are going to use them. The Carven are a hive mind species." "Right. They share information and coordinate through some kind of collective consciousness." "Yes," Kira confirmed. "That is their greatest strength. Thousands of drones acting as one." "It is also their greatest weakness," Marcus replied with a cold smile. "A hive mind works on patterns and predictions. They overwhelm enemies through superior coordination and numbers, but they struggle with chaos, with the unexpected, with enemies who do not behave the way they are supposed to." He looked at Kira with an intensity that made her scales prickle. "Your people are hunters." "Yes, you tracked prey through these forests for generations before the Carven came." "We were," Kira admitted, "before they took everything from us." "Then it is time to remember those skills," Marcus said, "because we are not going to sit here and wait for them to find us. We are going to go out there and hunt them." Thenis made a sound of disbelief. "Hunt the Carven with what? Our people are exhausted and wounded. We have barely any weapons left." "Then we make weapons," Marcus replied. "And we use what advantages we have. Knowledge of the terrain, the narrow passages, the element of surprise. We hit them fast and hard in places they do not expect. And we disappear before they can respond." He turned to face the gathered refugees, raising his voice so all could hear. "I am not going to lie to you. The odds are bad, and the enemy is strong. But I have seen worse odds beaten by people who refuse to accept defeat." The Velith stared at him, this strange creature from a world that should have killed him. And Kira saw something flicker in their eyes, something that had been dead for a long time. "Hope. Humans have a saying." Marcus continued. "It is not over until it is over, and I do not see anyone here who is ready to give up." Little Vetha pushed forward, her small hands clenched into fists. "I am not giving up," she declared fiercely one by one. The other Velith echoed her. Even old Thenis straightened his spine and nodded. Kira felt tears prickle at her eyes. For 3 cycles she had watched her people break under the weight of despair, and now this impossible creature. This human from a death asterisk. The first raid happened on the 3rd night. Marcus had spent 2 days preparing, scavenging every useful piece of technology from his crashed escape pod, and teaching the able-bodied Velith the basics of guerrilla warfare. They had made makeshift weapons from salvaged metal, created signal devices from the pod's communication array, and mapped every hidden passage in the canyon. Now it was time to see if any of it would work. Kira moved silently through the darkness beside Marcus, her forearms helping her climb the rocky terrain with an agility that he clearly envied. Behind them came 5 Velith warriors, the best hunters among the refugees, armed with spears tipped with metal from the human's vessel. Their target was a Carven supply depot near the northern canyon entrance, a temporary structure filled with the strange organic technology the insectoids used to power their equipment. "Remember," Marcus whispered as they approached their positions. "Hit hard, hit fast, and disappear before they can organize a response. Do not engage in prolonged combat. We are ghosts, not soldiers." Kira nodded and signaled the others to spread out. They had practiced this maneuver a dozen times. each Velith knowing exactly where to strike and when to retreat. The Carven guards patrolled the depot in predictable patterns, their hive mind coordination making them efficient but also terribly routine. They never expected an attack from below. Kira struck first, her spear finding the gap between a drone's head and thorax with the precision of generations of hunting instinct. The guard fell without a sound within seconds. 4 more guards joined it on the ground. Marcus moved to the supply containers and placed the improvised explosive he had constructed from the pod's emergency flares and fuel cells. 30 seconds, he called softly, and they ran. The explosion lit up the canyon like a second sunrise, and the distant clicking of alarm Carven filled the air as the depot went up in flames. By the time the response teams arrived, the raiders had vanished into the maze of narrow passages. They struck again the next night, and the night after that. Sometimes they targeted supply lines, destroying food and equipment before it could reach the main forces. Sometimes they attacked isolated patrol groups, killing the drones and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Each time, the Carven tried to predict where the next attack would come. The humans in Velith struck somewhere completely unexpected. Marcus called it psychological warfare. The goal was not just to kill enemies, it was to make them afraid, to make them doubt, to disrupt the cold efficiency of the hive mind with the chaos of uncertainty. And it was working. Kira could see it in the way the Carven patrols moved now, jumping at shadows, clustering together for protection instead of spreading out for effective coverage. They were scared. The Dominion, which had never known fear in 10,000 years of conquest, was learning what it felt like to be hunted. But success came with a price. Marcus pushed himself beyond all reasonable limits, going days without sleep, fighting through injuries that would have killed a lesser being. Kira watched him work through exhaustion that should have rendered him unconscious, his body running on pure willpower and something she could only describe as controlled rage. "You need to rest," she told him after their 7th raid, when she caught him barely able to stand. "Your body cannot sustain this pace." "I will rest when your people are safe," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse but determined. "You will rest now," Kira insisted, using 2 of her arms to guide him to a sitting position while the other 2 checked his wounds. "Or I will have the others hold you down while I force you into a healing sleep." Marcus laughed weakly at that. "Has anyone ever told you that you are incredibly stubborn?" "A human taught me," Kira replied with a slight smile. She sat beside him in the quiet darkness of their hidden camp, the sounds of sleeping refugees soft around them. "May I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why do you push yourself like this? You have no obligation to us. You could hide in the sanctuary and wait for your rescue signal to bring help. Why do you risk your life again and again for people you only just met?" Marcus was silent for a long moment, staring at the distant stars visible through a gap in the canyon ceiling. "On Earth," he said finally, "we nearly destroyed ourselves more times than I can count. Wars, plagues, disasters, our own stupidity. Every generation faced something that could have wiped us out. And every generation somehow survived through a combination of luck and sheer bloody-mindedness." He shifted, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "We learned that the universe does not care about us. It is not actively malicious, just indifferent. And the only thing that keeps any of us alive is each other. We help strangers because we know that someday we might be the strangers who need help." "That is a beautiful philosophy," Kira said softly. "It is not philosophy," Marcus replied. "It is survival. Humans who did not help each other died out. The ones who reached for their neighbors instead of turning away are the ones who made it. Cooperation is literally bred into us, right down to the bone." He looked at her with those strange small eyes that held so much determination. "When I saw you surrounded by those Carven, bleeding and fighting with nothing but a broken spear, I did not think about whether I should help. I just acted. Because that is what humans do. We see someone in trouble, and something in our brains screams at us to do something about it. Kira felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with physical temperatures. She had known this human for less than a week. And already he had given her people more than they had dared to hope for among the Velith, she said. We have a concept called pack bond. It is the connection between warriors who have fought together, who have saved each other's lives, who have become family not through blood, but through shared struggle. She placed one of her hands on his arm. You have earned pack bond with me. Marcus Cole, whatever happens next, you are no longer a stranger. You are Velith. Marcus's expression softened in a way she had not seen before. Thank you, he said quietly. That means more than you know. The moment was interrupted by a scout bursting into the camp, his scales pale with fear. Spear Maiden. A Carven fleet has arrived in orbit, dozens of ships, and they are landing troops at the canyon entrance. Kira's heart went cold. How many? Thousands, the scout gasped. And they have brought a Hive Admiral. The commander himself is here. Marcus rose to his feet, exhaustion forgotten. They are escalating, he said grimly. Our raids have hurt them enough that they are bringing in leadership to deal with us personally. A transmission crackled through the canyon, amplified by Carven speakers until it echoed off every wall. Attention. Vermin, the voice clicked, translated into Galactic Common for their benefit. I am Hive Admiral Varaketh of the Carven Dominion. Your pitiful resistance ends now. Kira and Marcus moved to a vantage point where they could see the canyon entrance. What they saw made Kira's blood freeze. Thousands of Carven drones in perfect formation, their chitin armor gleaming in the harsh lights of their transport ships. Elite soldiers, the kind that conquered worlds, and at their center, a massive creature nearly 3 times the size of a normal drone. Its carapace covered in metals and markings of countless victories. Shiv Admiral Varaketh. We know you harbor the unknown species. Varaketh's transmission continued. Surrender the alien creature, and the remaining Velith will be granted quick deaths in the harvesting vats. Refuse, and your suffering will be legendary. You will be kept alive for generations, experiencing every moment of agony as we slowly dissolve you piece by piece. Marcus stared at the army below them, and Kira expected to see fear in his eyes. Instead, she saw calculation. How long until they reached the sanctuary? He asked. At their current pace. Perhaps 6 hours, Kira replied. Then we have 6 hours to prepare, Marcus said. And there was something in his voice that made her scales tingle. Prepare for what? She asked. Marcus turned to face her, and she saw the fire burning behind his eyes. For the last stand, he said. For the fight they will never forget. He gripped her shoulder with a strength that belied his exhausted state. Go back to the sanctuary and gather everyone who can hold a weapon. The children and elderly stay hidden in the deepest chambers. Everyone else forms up at the temple entrance. You mean to fight, Kira said, not quite believing it. Against that. She gestured at the army below. Against thousands. Yes, Marcus replied simply. It is suicide. Probably, Marcus agreed. But dying on our feet is better than dying in a vat. And besides, I have a few tricks left. He started moving toward the sanctuary, then paused and looked back at her. Are you with me? Kira thought about the broken spear she had carried for 7 generations. She thought about her mother dissolving in the harvesting vat. She thought about little Vetha and old Thenis and all the others who had followed her to this place. She thought about a strange creature who fell from the sky and refused to let them die. I am with you, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Marcus nodded. Then let us show them what happens when you corner something that is not afraid to bite back. 6 hours later, as the first Carven scouts approached the sanctuary entrance, they were met by a wall of spears and the strangest sight any of them had ever seen. Hive Admiral Varaketh had conquered 37 worlds in his service to the Dominion. He had harvested billions of sentient creatures, broken countless civilizations, and never once faced an enemy he could not defeat through superior numbers and hive mind coordination. But as he stared at the ragged defenders blocking the sanctuary entrance, he felt something unfamiliar crawling through his neural network. Uncertainty. The unknown creature, the human they called themselves, stood at the center of the defensive line with wounds that should have rendered him immobile and a smile that made no tactical sense behind him. The remaining Velith had armed themselves with primitive weapons and positioned themselves in a formation that maximized their coverage of the narrow entrance. It was a pitiful defense, barely worthy of the Dominion's attention, and yet something about it made Varaketh hesitate. Admiral, his second-in-command, clicked. "Shall we begin the assault? Our forces await your command." Varaketh studied the human for a long moment. "What are you?" he asked through the translator, genuinely curious. What species produces warriors who smile in the face of certain death? The human's smile widened. "We are humans," he replied, "and we are very hard to kill. Your friends found that out the hard way." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled drones. They had all heard the reports from the canyon, the raids, the ambushes, the elite units that simply vanished in the night. This single creature had done more damage to Dominion forces in 1 week than entire armies had accomplished in years. Fascinating, Varaketh admitted, but ultimately irrelevant. You are outnumbered 100 to 1. Your defiance is admirable, but mathematically futile. "Math is not everything," the human replied. "And besides, I only need to hold you here long enough." "Long enough for what?" The human's smile became something sharp and dangerous. "For the cavalry to arrive." Varaketh made a clicking sound of contempt. "There is no help coming for you. Creature, we have ships in orbit. Nothing can reach this planet without our knowledge." "You sure about that?" the human asked, tilting his head in a gesture Varaketh did not understand. "Because I sent a distress beacon a week ago, and humans are very good at showing up when our people need us." Before Varaketh could respond, one of his communication officers rushed forward with urgency crackling through every joint. "Admiral, sensor contact, multiple vessels emerging from hyperspace at the system's edge. They do not match any known Dominion silhouettes." Varaketh felt a chill run through his carapace. "Identify them. Unknown configuration." "Admiral, but they are heading directly for Lesser 4 at maximum speed." The human laughed, and it was a sound of pure triumph. "That would be the Terran Third Fleet," he said. "They must have picked up my beacon. I told you, Admiral. Humans do not leave our people behind." Varaketh's compound eyes narrowed. "Your fleet cannot reach this planet in time to save you," he snarled. "I will kill every one of you before they arrive." "Maybe," the human agreed, still smiling. "But you will have to come through me to do it, and I promise you, Admiral, that I'm going to make it hurt." Varaketh had heard enough. "Kill them all," he commanded. "Leave none alive." The Carvan army surged forward like a chitinous tide. Thousands of drones driven by a single unified villain, the 40 defenders met them head-on. Marcus fired his pistol until the magazine was empty, each shot dropping a drone with the deadly precision of Terran ammunition. When the bullets ran out, he drew his knife and waded into the enemy. Fighting with a ferocity that defied comprehension, Kira fought beside him, her forearms wielding the salvaged metal spear in a dance of death that would have made her ancestors weep with pride. She had never felt so alive, so certain, so utterly unafraid. Around them, the other Velith held their ground, their improvised weapons finding gaps in chitin armor with the skill of a people who had been hunters for 10,000 years. Drones fell by the dozens, their hive mind coordination disrupted by the chaos of the narrow battlefield. But there were simply too many. One by one, the defenders fell. A warrior, impaled by a serrated blade. An elder crushed beneath a massive drone. A young hunter dragged into the massive enemies and, whilst the line began to buckle, Marcus took a blade through his shoulder and kept fighting. He took another across his thigh and kept fighting. Blood poured from a dozen wounds, and still he stood, refusing to fall, refusing to give the enemy the satisfaction of seeing him break. Kira watched in horrified awe as he killed 3 more drones with nothing but a knife and spite. Moving through pain that should have been paralyzing. "How?" she gasped as she fought beside him. "How are you still standing?" "I told you," Marcus grunted, driving his knife into a drone's eye cluster. "We are too angry to die." But even human stubbornness had limits. A massive elite drone broke through the line and slammed into Marcus, driving him to the ground. Kira screamed and lunged to help, but 2 more drones blocked her path, their blades forcing her back. She watched helplessly as the elite raised its weapon for the killing blow, and then a beam of light lanced down from the sky and vaporized the drone where it stood. More beams followed, cutting through the cavern ranks like fire through dry grass. The roar of engines filled the air as human dropships descended from the clouds, their weapons blazing with devastating accuracy. "Terran Third Fleet," a voice boomed from speakers mounted on the lead dropship. "Stand down and surrender or be destroyed." The Carven army, caught between the defenders at the front and the fleet at their backs, descended into chaos. Their hive mind, designed for coordinated assault, could not process this reversal quickly enough to adapt. Marines in power armor dropped from the ships and hit the ground fighting, their weapons cutting through drones with terrifying efficiency. Cyberif screamed orders, but his forces were fragmenting, the unity of the hive mind shattering under the pressure of unexpected defeat. Kira cut down the drones blocking her path and fought her way to Marcus, who had somehow managed to rise to his feet despite injuries that should have killed him 3 times over. "Told you," he said with a bloody grin. "Cavalry." The battle was over in minutes. The Terran Third Fleet's firepower was overwhelming. Their Marines' ruthlessly efficient Carven drones surrendered in waves, their will to fight broken by the complete collapse of their tactical advantage. Avarik himself was cornered by a squad of Marines and forced to his knees. He looked up at Marcus, who limped over to stand before him despite the protests of the medics trying to treat his wounds. "What are you?" the Admiral asked again, his voice hollow with defeat. Marcus knelt down to meet the Admiral's compound eyes. "We are humans," he said. "We are the species that looked at the universe, saw it wanted us dead, and said no. We are the species that crawls out of every disaster through sheer stubbornness. We are the fire you cannot kill. Admiral, and you made a terrible mistake when you attacked our people." He rose and turned away, leaving Varakath to be taken into custody. The surviving Velith gathered in the ruins of their defensive line, barely a dozen remaining from the 40 who had stood against the Horde, but they were alive against all odds, against every calculation of probability. They were alive. Kira found Marcus collapsed against a boulder, being tended by human medics who were muttering in disbelief about his wounds. "He should be dead," she heard one of them say. "Multiple lacerations, significant blood loss, possible internal injuries. How the hell was he still fighting?" "Because he had to be," Kira replied, kneeling beside her pack brother. "Because people needed him. Is that not what humans do?" The medic stared at her for a moment, then laughed. "Yeah," he admitted. "I guess it is." 3 days later, Kira stood in the medical bay of the Terran flagship, watching Marcus sleep peacefully for the first time since she had known him. His wounds were healing under the care of human medicine, technology far more advanced than anything the Velith possessed. The Terran Admiral had offered asylum to her people, a new world where they could rebuild their civilization under the protection of an Alliance treaty. 46 survivors. No, 45 now. They had lost old Dennis in the final battle, would become the seeds of a new Velith nation. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. Marcus stirred and opened his eyes, blinking in confusion at the sterile white ceiling. "Hey," he said weakly when he saw her. "We won?" "We won," Kira confirmed. "Your fleet arrived just in time. The Carven are retreating from this entire sector. They fear your people now." Marcus laughed, then winced at the pain it caused. "Good," he said. "They should." Kira reached into the pack she carried and withdrew a long object wrapped in ceremonial cloth. "I have something for you," she said. "A gift from my people." She unwrapped the cloth to reveal a spear, beautifully crafted. Its shaft made from the crimson wood of HFY, and its blade forged from salvaged Terran metal. "It is called a bond spear," she explained. "Given to those who have earned pact bond with the Velith. You are the first outsider in our history to receive one." Marcus took the weapon with trembling hands, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I do not know what to say," he admitted. "Say you will visit us," Kira replied. "On whatever world we make our new home, say you will tell your people about the Velith. And we will tell our children about the human who fell from the sky and refused to let us die." Marcus gripped the spear tightly. "I promise," he said. Kira smiled, a human expression she had learned from him.